Capello
Hello.
at the character selection screen of Street Fighter 4.
SF4.
Yes, what character are you gonna pick?
That would be Poison, who, not necessarily a bad person, but yeah. So Poison didn't come out until Ultra Street Fighter 4.
Which
And
is like the second release of Street Fighter or the third?
it might be the third.
Okay.
Yeah. It's basically the last one before Omega, but Omega was sort of like a, not really a full release. It's sort
Uh-huh.
of like an experimental one. But Poison was my girl there. Mostly because I love her aesthetic, and she's fun to play also. But if we're talking vanilla Street Fighter 4,
Sure.
it was M Bison.
And Bison.
Yeah, my M Bison was the first one I picked up. As soon as SF4 came out. When I first picked up SF4,
Mhm.
I started with M Bison.
Can I ask you a question?
Uh-huh.
Does the M Bison stand for meaty bison?
It might. Well,
What?
it's
What? There's no like. Nobody knows.
well, it's supposed to be Mike Tyson.
Really?
So the thing is, when Street Fighter came over to the U.S., they mixed up two characters. Balrog, who is the black boxer, was supposed to be M. Bison because he's a play on Mike Tyson. And then
wow.
M. Bison was supposed to be Balrog, but they switched it up, and Capcom kept it ever since.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Learning something new every day about Street Fighter.
Yeah, M. Bison was the first one I picked up in SF4.
Uh-huh.
But once Ultra came out, I switched to Poison because I just like her more.
Capello, hi.
Hello. Again.
Yes, again. You said hello in the beginning of this. You are our third guest in this. It's the same thing I say when I recorded Mikey's earlier. I don't know if this is going to go on or if this is just going to be a profile kind of thing. But I think that if anyone, like on base, that lives local, wants to be interviewed or just wants to have a chat with me, then they can do so. That might be just fun
Yeah.
because I like the idea of this.
It'd be a nice thing to do.
Yeah, for sure.
You also need to get Marcos eventually.
And for that, I'd rather have him here. So when he's here for Christmas, I'm going to.
Just steal him.
Well,
Just,
I mean, he's going to show up
Yeah.
here,
Yeah,
without being announced.
You don't have to get that Marcos. You can just do that.
Actually, all I need is some bitter wine, and we're good to go.
It's like catnip for
For
Marcos.
Marcos. Bitter wine is, you're not wrong. That's how you catch a Marcos Martinez. Because once he wildly appears, you want to make sure you catch him in that Pokeball. Anyways, Capello, you are my third guest on this interview series. I guess I'm going to call it that. You actually no. You are the next character I've selected.
Okay.
That's why this podcast is called that.
Yep.
So Capello, I'm gonna start with a very basic question. Do you remember the first game you ever played,
The first game I played.
or to the best of your recollection?
So it's one of two.
Okay.
It's either Super Mario Bros. Or
Mhm.
Super Mario World
Mhm.
or Donkey Kong Country.
All right. Which one are you more fond of?
Probably Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just a thing when you were playing it.
It was. Well, I have very fond memories of it because my grandmother would play with me.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I would play Donkey Kong Country. I don't know why she liked it so much, but yeah, I would put it on and she'd get player 2 and we'd just back and forth. And of course, this is when I was really young,
Uh-huh.
and my grandmother isn't the most technologically adept, so we never went very far.
But she still played it with
I mean,
you.
She played it with me,
Yeah.
which was fun.
That's kind of a
you
nice
know.
thing. Would it be safe to assume that like an NES or an SNES was your first console?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
It's likely the SNES. That was my first,
Mhm.
at least the first one that I remember.
Having in the house.
Mhm.
And so, you have a younger brother, right?
I have two younger brothers.
You have two younger brothers. I'm sorry. Maybe later on in life, was it always a one console kind of household, or did you all have your own, or did you all struggle to? Was it the power struggle of who's going to have the controller first?
It was we were a one console, family. The thing is that we would take care of our previous consoles, so we always we had an SNES, and when we got the 64, we had an SNES and a 64. Then my dad eventually got a PlayStation original, and so we had all those three. So we had options between all of us, and my dad would get them like super cheap from a pawn shop, basically like a year or two after they would release.
Okay.
Minus the N64, which we got for Christmas almost like immediately when it came out. Yeah.
Okay, this is probably a hard question. Do you remember if it came out in the fall or in the spring? It probably came out in the fall, right?
It might have. I know I got it. It was relatively new when we got it.
Yeah.
I remember it being like a Christmas present, even if it was maybe a little earlier or later than Christmas. But we did get it as a Christmas gift.
So actually, I want to go backwards a little bit. So you said that Donkey Kong was one of the first games you played. Have you revisited the game since?
Donkey Kong Country, not for a very long time. I had, through emulation, played Donkey Kong Country 2, which I enjoy more than the original.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I still have a working SNES.
Damn, you gotta pull that out at some point.
Oh, yeah. But it is very old, so I'm kind of afraid to touch it.
Yeah.
And I have the wires for it, and we have a controller for it, and there's still a couple of games around the house that, including Donkey Kong Country 2, actually. And yeah, I'm fairly certain it still works, but it is very old.
It would be at this point, especially it's almost like 25 years,
something like that. Yeah,
maybe a little more than that.
It's wow, antique. Actually, I think the SNES came out when I was born, not the day, but the year.
The year, yeah.
Which is, I believe, 1992.
We're all old.
Yeah, we're getting on, man.
It is. So, what's the first game that hooked you on the concept of gaming as a hobby?
That hooked me as a hobby, it would probably be Pokemon. Like the first one that really made me want to just keep buying, keep experiencing is definitely Pokemon. And I started with Pokemon Yellow, actually. I didn't have Red or Blue, and I got a Game Boy like fairly not super late into its lifespan, probably around midway through the Game Boy Color's lifespan. I got a Game Boy and I got Pokemon Yellow, and I loved it, man. I loved Pokemon. Like once Silver had been announced, I was like, I need to get that one. And then as the years went on, more Pokemon games kept coming out, and more titles that I loved kept coming out, and I realized, I just love gaming.
I think for a lot of people our age or of our generation probably went the same route, because Pokemon at that time, massive phenomenon. And I mean, it was all over. I mean, when I was in middle school and high school, it was still, it was there. It was huge. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone wanted to bring their Game Boy Advances or whatever to school. So
Pokemon was the hook for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And it differs from person to person. Like, I know Mario was a big one, and Doom, things like that. But for me, it was definitely Pokemon. But I love turn-based RPG.
So with that said, what genre influences you the most right now, or has influenced you the most over, like, in terms of your tastes? Like, what genre has evolved your taste in gaming?
Definitely RPGs. Specifically fantasy, but not like wholesomely, fantasy. Well, fantasy in a way, but like sci-fi and just this. It's story. That's really what really brought me, or really that I really enjoy about the gaming experience, is the story of it.
Yeah. What's the game that told you or convinced you or that showed you that gaming as a whole was much more than just a toy or a hobby? Like, when did you know that, wow, like this is like an important medium? Or did you have a specific game or an experience that drew that conclusion, if you've had that?
That's an easy answer. It's Bioshock.
Okay.
It's
all right.
100%. Bioshock awakened me to the fact that video games can be art. They can be art that is as high as Michelangelo and Salvador Dali, all the great artists. I saw Bioshock, I played through it, and then I realized, this was art. It's not. It is a game that you enjoy, but there's so many layers of depth that you can just go into it, and you can just peel off another and find another layer, peel off a layer, find another layer, and it's a bottomless pit of art, but plainly.
Bioshock came out in 2007 or 8. So there was nothing before that really got you that way. Like there was nothing narratively impactful.
There's quite a lot that I enjoyed, right? But for the longest time, and despite me, sort of being a geek, a nerd who was a bookworm and things like that, nothing really like awoke in me like Bioshock did. Like I could appreciate games and play through them, but the stigma constantly told me that, oh, it's just a game, it's a silly toy, and that was the worldview for a lot of people, and specifically down here, because in South Texas, because we're just a little bit we were a little bit slower on the times.
Yeah,
dude, just because of the culture
has a lot to do with it.
The nature of the people here. But yeah, like I finally broke down a game and appreciated for being more than a game when I played through Bioshock, and it was an eye-opening experience. Like once that happened, I then looked backwards at all the games that I played, and I realized there are narratives here that go way deeper than I thought they did.
Yeah.
And I started enjoying them. I started enjoying previous games more, playing through previous games, and realizing that books and video games gave me the same amount of enjoyment, but at the same time, video games give you much more than a book can. So like in terms of audio design and visual designs and narrative, they come from the same place, right? Mm-hmm. But video games obviously are a much more complicated medium, which requires authors and composers and programmers
and artists,
designers, what have you.
I don't want this to necessarily be commentary on whether video games are art or not, but I think that people in video games have their work cut out for them compared to an author, because an author, I'm not discounting their work that goes into it, because it's not easy to be a writer, especially today, right? But all they have to do on paper is write. That's a bad pun. Is write a story, right, and create the story and create the characters and humanize them, right? Because that's from that perspective, it's a lot hard to do because it's just on paper. How are you going to connect to the character? Which is why emotion comes into play and stuff like that. But a game has to do so much more than that.
Yeah, it's to put it in other terms. An author does hard work for what they do to create their narrative in a writing style, right? Yeah. In a video game, you have to do that, and then you have to get a composer to work just as hard to meet the narrative, and music. You need a coder to work just as hard to make the game work, and then you need a visual designer to work just as hard to make the visuals and the style of the game. Like it's
complement the story, which is hard enough.
Which is why video games are so amazing. Like they take all other mediums of art that we know, and they implement them into one thing.
It's very true. I'm glad that you chose Bioshock. That's a fantastic. That's one of the best answers, probably.
Bioshock, maybe it's in my top 5 games. I can't put it at number 1, but I do love it to death.
Yeah, which we did talk about quite a bit in the past, like 3 episodes of our podcast, because it's become relevant again with not that it ever lost relevancy, but because of the collectors,
and that's because we are still going to have an entire episode of the podcast to talk about Bioshock.
Just in case you're not tired of hearing about Bioshock, well, we have more for you. Is there a genre or game that you wish you could have gotten into when you were younger, or you would like to explore in the future?
It would probably be MOBAs. I never did get super into like the MOBA craze when it came out. So League of Legends blew up real big, and there's obviously Dota 2 right now,
which is massive also
and
as well.
more and more people are coming out with MOBA games, and I really didn't find an awful lot of enjoyment in them, and mostly I believe it's because there's no narrative, and that's one of the biggest things that I look for in gaming is that there be a narrative. And I also wasn't super into team-based games because I wouldn't really ever co-op with my brothers, like very, very rarely. But I mean, I did since the inception of the MOBA find some enjoyment in a game like Heroes of the Storm, which I got into because it has all my favorite Blizzard characters. And
so that was your incentive to get into that.
Yeah, that was my incentive to get into that. And they touted it as a less complicated version of an arena fighter. So I did find enjoyment in that, and it has led me to want to explore more, to see well, maybe Smite's cool, maybe League of Legends isn't as bad as I think it is. It probably is just
still
as bad
very
as
toxic.
I think it is, but
yeah,
games like Paragon intrigue me. Games like Battleborn intrigue me, which isn't a MOBA precisely, but it's close.
Got some elements in there.
Of all the genres, it may have to be MOBA.
But you do still play a bit of Heroes of the Storm here and there, right?
Yeah. I have it casually. Whenever there's a new hero that really interests me,
you'll make an effort
I'll
to play
go
it.
in and I'll try and get the gold to buy that hero.
Cool. So you mentioned your brothers again a little earlier. Was there a specific game that you all bonded over, or that you all grew up liking, that you have like the hive mind, like, yeah, that's our game, that's the game we play together, or anything like that?
007 Goldeneye.
Yeah,
that was the game that my brothers and I we would play. We would go into the PvP, the multiplayer, and we would be there for hours, just fighting over who got odd job.
Okay, so who would get odd job most of the time?
Oh, me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was the oldest. I was the one who played odd job.
Do you guys have a favorite map?
It may. I think it's the satellite one.
Yeah, that's in the movie. It's near the end, right?
It is the end.
That's where they fight. That's where 007 fights Trevelyan, right?
Yes.
Right.
So yeah, I think that probably, at least it was my favorite map. I can't speak for my brothers because.
Hey, you know what? Those are actually, thinking about it now. Maybe I just have I'm still thinking about my perspective when I was younger, but they made big maps in that game. I think that one was pretty big. That's scaled from one end to the other. Like it was huge. It took you
fairly sizable map.
Yeah, it was. It took you time to get from one end to the next. I really like. I know, kind of going off on a tangent, but I really like Pyramid, or was it Pyramid or Temple, with the sliding doors in the temple.
Yes.
Oh man, that was great.
That's a good one.
Oh, Facility is really good too with the bathrooms.
Yeah,
there's that legendary thing of you popping out of the vent on top and shooting the guy that's taking a shit.
Yeah,
I love that. That's
so good.
Capello, what is, or rather, do you think you'll be playing games for the rest of your life?
Oh, absolutely. If I'm not playing them, I want to be making them.
Okay.
Because I'm an artist at heart. I draw, I write, I compose. I do all that, and to have a medium where I can literally have all of my interests in one place. It's fantastic. So literally, if I'm not playing games, I want to be making them.
It's interesting. So far, the three people that I've interviewed, you've been more sure than everyone else. Because Ben was not that Ben was unsure about his answer, but he was definitely he had a different way of looking at it. It's like I think his answer was, or his question rather was, what happens if I'm not playing games? In truth, I would imagine that most people's answers are going to be like that.
Yeah, it's true. You really need to be passionate about gaming to even think about it like 50 years in the future,
Yeah,
right?
that's true. We're gonna be 80 years old in a nursing home, and we're gonna be the ones playing the games.
I'll have Pokemon, just sitting in my wheelchair, bothering the nurses.
When I was talking to Mikey earlier, we were like, you're gonna be sitting there in your chair, and you're gonna be telling your grandchildren, hey, I used to back in my day Call of Duty, and they're gonna be like, what the fuck's Call of Duty? It's good. Activision will have made a new game by then.
Back in my day, there were only 151 Pokemon.
Well, technically, that is back in your day, because now there's way fucking more.
Oh yeah, that is back in my day. Oh boy.
What's your favorite game?
Oh, my favorite game. That would have to be Chrono Trigger.
Give me a couple reasons why.
All right, so let me first set the stage on what I consider to be one of the greatest games of all time. I'm not alone in this sentiment, but it's often won out by games like Final Fantasy VII, and things like Half-Life and things like that. But everybody has their own favorite game,
of course,
right?
Yeah.
So I'm not alone in my sentiment that this is one of the best games of all time, and my history with it is back. My first console was the SNES, as I said.
Yeah.
And one of the games that caught my eye, mostly because the characters on the front of the game looked like they were from Dragon Ball Z, right? And I used to watch Dragon Ball Z on the Mexican channel.
With Spanish voiceover.
Yeah, very when I was very young, and initially, I really liked it, right? And I played this when I was super young, but I never got far with it, right? And it became one of those games that I didn't appreciate until Bioshock came to, like I said, awaken me from, the little ignorance that I had about what games could do. And so one of the games that I decided to go back to was Chrono Trigger. And I found one of the most interesting, compelling narratives that I have ever witnessed. And it has a lot, the premise of Chrono Trigger is a lot to do with time travel, right? And not everybody gets time travel correct. Chrono Trigger absolutely gets time travel correct. Mm-hmm. Like the entire story about going back and forth through time and changing things and seeing how those changes affect the world around you, and there being this gigantic backstory and these other smaller narratives that are going on in between. It just going back to it, that the first time that I revisited the game, I really just started realizing how good it was, how good the narrative was. And like I said, I love turn-based RPGs. That's another thing that Chrono Trigger does right. And Chrono Trigger has one of the best soundtracks in all of gaming.
That I have to agree with you.
Yeah,
the soundtrack from that game is spectacular.
If you can take nothing else from Chrono Trigger, like say you don't like the JRPG style, say you don't like turn-based combat, say you're just not into the narrative, the soundtrack is absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful,
Yeah, I agree with you. So you would say, in your personal taste, that it's better than, from the perspective of it being a JRPG, better than Final Fantasy VII?
People are going to hate me for this.
I love your chuckle. That was great.
I am one of the people who thinks Final Fantasy VII is completely overrated.
I mean, I don't disagree with you at all. I think it's talked up to be this incredible thing, which I'm sure for a lot of people it is.
Like, don't get me wrong. Final Fantasy VII is great. The story is cool. Mm-hmm. The mechanics are great. The characters are cool. It's just not as good. Like I cannot bring myself to enjoy Final Fantasy VII as much as any other game.
Yeah,
like it doesn't. It's a good game, but it will never make my top 10.
Okay, that's fair. I think that's fair.
Yeah, unless the remake proves to be like super freaking awesome and amazing.
We'll see.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I think that's a hard one. I like Chrono Trigger. I love whenever they play it for games done quick.
Yeah.
I think was it last year that was the last game they played on that Sunday.
I stood awake.
Yeah,
stood
I thought it
awake
was a
for that.
great. And even then, like that speed run was still like 7 hours because there's
yeah.
no way to cut the game like further down.
Yeah, it was it wasn't quick, and that's with certain hacks and interesting things that you can do with the game. But I mean, I love it. It's my favorite game of all time. There hasn't been a contender since. Like there are games that come close, but like I can
Imitations or draw inspiration from the game.
Mm-hmm. And it's literally a game that every year, like I'll find somebody who's done a cover, or I'll find like a new piece of music, or somebody talking about, hey, maybe the remake is gonna get a reboot or a remake or a sequel. And while that never happens, it always brings me back, and I go and play another playthrough.
Yeah.
Almost every year.
Wow, it's your tradition then.
Mm-hmm.
So, would you say that Chrono Trigger doesn't need a sequel? Like, is it one of those games that's just good as a standalone?
It has a sequel.
Oh, it
but
does?
Nobody talks about it.
Oh, is it good?
It's varying depending on who you're talking to.
Okay.
It's called Chrono Cross.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and it has mixed feelings. It has great music.
Mm-hmm.
The Chrono Cross, they got the music right again with Chrono Cross, but maybe the narrative isn't for everybody.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think. While it would be real nice to have like a Chrono Trigger with given the Final Fantasy VII treatment, it really doesn't need it.
Okay,
And
it's it remains a classic.
It remains a classic. The 16-bit art style, it's eternal. It's going to look good forever
compared to 3D games. Especially of the like N64, PlayStation 1 era, which don't hold up at all today from that perspective.
I mean, several PlayStation 2 and 3 games are iffy.
I totally agree.
They're going to age bad. But Chrono Trigger, the 16-bit style, it's perfect. It will be eternal in how good it is. And it's only accentuated by the amazing soundtrack and the beautiful narrative and the interesting characters.
Yeah.
Minus Chrono, because he's just a blank slate. But everything about that game, it really defined what I liked going forward, and that was after going backwards and revisiting it after playing Bioshock and realizing, there's something deep about certain games.
Absolutely. Capello, thank you very much for taking my bullshit questions and kind of making them your own.
No problem.
But yeah, in that case, I'll probably see you after the show or tomorrow or whatever happens. So thanks for listening, and thanks, Capello.
All right, thank you.